What do you respond to, Leon or Leon John?
Either or, they're both my names, right? Leon John is my second name. It's my grandfather's name actually, because my grandfather was called John, so it was my inheritance name. But because of the technicalities and difficulties with Apple Music and Spotify and the number of Leons that are out there's another Leon in France she's a pretty big artist. People are struggling to find me through the haystack of Leons. So I had to give myself another name. And my last name is a little bit too much of a tongue twister. So I thought, let's go with my second name, then Leon John. Either or. It sounds a bit foreign, doesn't it? Like, at least to my ear anyway, to be like Leon John, because people never use that name growing up. But either or, darling. Either or. It really just depends.
How do people respond to it? Do they think that it's your real name, or do they think that it's a stage name?
I don't know. I mean, I've never had any encounters with anybody that thinks that it's fake, at least so far, anywhere. Well, anyway. I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I think it's still very early for people to kind of wrap their heads around it. And I haven't really, honestly, the answer is I haven't had any encounters with anybody that says, oh, is that your real name yet? And you're actually the first person to ask me that. But maybe people are just like thinking and they're like, oh, he's so extra. You know what I mean? And also the parallel between the John and the link to Elton John, they probably think, oh, it's something to do with that. But it's actually my name. My name is Leon John Takutawacha on my birth certificate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's all different parts of me, different parts that form the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose the person who's working with your graphics and designing the packaging and the brand Leon John was so happy because it's like both four-lettered words, and when you look at them, because I was looking at your name, and like from a typography and design element, they all fall underneath each other and it works.
Well, I'm the person that's designing my branding and my typography, so it really was a lucky coincidence. It was a lucky mistake, I guess. And maybe my parents, you know how Mariah Carey's mother was like, oh, she named her Mariah Carey precisely because she wanted her to become like a pop star. Maybe my parents did the same thing as well, but I really don't. I think it's just pure coincidence. It's just happenstance. And luckily for me, because I can stack them one on top of the other, and it fits perfectly.
It really does.
Yeah.
Fit perfectly.
Yeah.
And in detail, can you please introduce yourself and what you do?
So, my name is Leon John, and I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm a storyteller, rather, actually. I'd like to think of myself as who uses the voice as the medium through which I tell my stories. I really could have been writing books or writing articles or giving speeches or doing any number of things within the storytelling medium, but I was fortunate enough to have been given the gift and the blessing of music and the gift of music, and so I use that as my medium to relay stories, to relay life experiences. I always say my responsibility is to caution, to narrate, to educate. I'm missing. There's another one. It's four of them. Yes, it's caution, it's educate, narrate, and activate.
Yeah.
Right. And I do all those four things through my storytelling, or at least I aim to do all four of those things through my storytelling. That's my responsibility. That's what I believe I was brought here on earth to do. And my friend and I always say, if there was ever a day that I stopped doing the work that I was brought here to do, which is what I just explained, I would die. I'd be ready to go. But up until that day, knock on wood, we're still going to be here doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what came first, the writing or the music?
The music. The voice came first, actually. Yes, I didn't know that I could sing, weirdly enough. My elder brother was the singer. He was about 9 years older than me, and he used to sing in school choirs, at boarding school, and all that kind of stuff. And so it was always assumed that, oh, whatever, the gift is his. And then I must have been around maybe 11 or 12, if not slightly younger, but I was in year 7, which is the equivalent of your guys' grade 7 in South Africa. And we were in music class, and we were doing like a choral piece, and this was like, and I suppose in the educational context that I come from, year 7 is the first year of high school, right? It's the transitional year between primary and high school and secondary school, actually. And so I think this was like the first, maybe second music class, and we're singing and we're doing like a choral line, and we were singing, I think it was R. Kelly's I Believe I Can Fly or something. and we're all standing in a line, and old school projectors, the ones with the clear papers, and it was projecting against the wall, and we're all reading the lyrics, and here I am casually singing, and then the teacher's walking around the room, and he's listening in, and he's pretty brisk when it comes to everybody else, right? He's just trying to make sure that everybody's singing the right parts and whatever, and then he gets to me, then he stops, just literally just stops, he stands still, and he listens, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh no, I'm messing up. It's the first day of music class and already I'm failing. So I start to sing louder and louder and louder. And it just keeps getting closer and closer the louder that I get. And I'm thinking, oh God. And bear in mind, this was a new school. I'd recently moved to the school. And so I'm like, oh God, what a first impression to make. Anyway, he eventually moves on. And the choral piece ends, and then I think towards the end of the class, and I'm panicking throughout the duration of this class, because he didn't say anything else after the stopping. He continues on with his lesson, and then right after the lesson is over, and it's break time, and he's dismissing everybody, then he says, thanks for coming to class, whatever, Leon, could you please stay over? I'm like, oh shit, what have I done now? I've really done it now, oh my God. I stay over, and he says to me, you really do have such a marvelous voice, and I'd love for you to sing in assembly. And I think just the shock of what he was saying in comparison to what I thought was the problem, rendered me dumbfounded, and I was like, okay, sure, okay. And since then, it's kind of been a thing. I've just kind of been singing, and trying to develop and grow and learn. But it wasn't up until I watched Dreamgirls, maybe a few months later, if not a year later, that I firmly decided that I wanted to be a musician, or I wanted to be a singer, or I wanted to be in the performing arts. And I remember distinctly watching Dreamgirls, and I was sat in front of the TV on the carpet, and my dad was working on the computer, just a few meters away. And the movie, I was enamored throughout the whole movie, and then the movie ends, and I go to my dad, I'm like, oh my God, Dad, I just watched the most transcendental movie. I want to be that, I want to do that, I want to sing. I want to be a star. I don't think I said I wanted to be a star, really. I had no cognition of what starhood meant at that point, but all I knew was I wanted to sing, and I wanted to sing publicly. And I wanted whatever life that Dina was living in the film. And then my dad was like, okay, sure, whatever. And I don't think he thought much of it at that point. But surprisingly, I've kept it up. And the desire keeps growing and growing and growing. The more that I do, the more that I sing, every time I sing, the desire to be out in public and sing to people grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm not good for anything else.
Yeah.
This is what I'm good for.
So the voice was there. It wasn't a matter of it came first. It was always there.
It was always, I just didn't know.
When did the writing show itself to you?
Much, much later. I think probably in university, in my undergrad. The desire had always been there. I think a few years after I discovered I could sing, and I had a vague idea of what a songwriter was, right? But also I was operating under the assumption that singers and music makers were completely different. Was operating under the assumption that you're just given things to sing and Bob's your uncle. But I think at some point my cognition switched, and I realized, oh no, the people that actually make these stories, they're actually people that actually write these things down and write these ideas down, and there's a story element to it, because I think at that point I always thought of music as sound and not particularly as story. And later on in high school, I was very much about the idea of writing. I guess it was also about the time that I discovered Adele and that whole Adele movement, right? And the fact that she was highlighted specifically as being a songwriter. And the 21 era was such an important era for me, I think, in my own musical development, because it made it very clear that singers are also storytellers, right? And so from then on, I was pretty obsessed with the idea of writing my own music, but I don't think I quite understood how to, right? It was very much conceptual. It was very much kind of words on a paper. I didn't understand how to merge those two worlds together. But I was very much interested in learning, was very active in researching and trying to find out how they do it and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until probably my second year of university when I was now at WITS and I was a part of this society called the WITS Music Society, and it was just such a melting pot of aspiring musicians and mostly aspiring singers, and we would all kind of organize and try and teach each other and learn from each other and socialize with each other and be in a space where we could appreciate and make music and learn about music and talk about music that wasn't kind of in an official degree way, because all of us were doing kind of separate things. Other people were doing law degrees, other people were doing science, whatever it was. But MuseDoc was a place where we'd come together every Thursday and have vocal lessons, and it was peer-to-peer. And I met my collaborator, my most frequent collaborator, called Dato Mokwena, and he's a guitarist, a brilliant guitarist who listens to a lot of acoustic music, and he has a very specific and particular way of picking his guitar and the way that he plays it. And there was this one day we were sat in the music office and he started to pluck these chords. And like instantly, it came to me. It was almost kind of spontaneous, and I started to sing my song Somebody right there and then. Kind of like a stream of consciousness. And I think that was the first time I was able to marry those two worlds together, particularly because I think the music led first, right? The music led, it inspired a feeling, and then my responsibility was then translating that feeling and articulating it into words. And from then on, it's just been consistent, right? Once it clicked in my head and once it clicked that these two things work together, they can be married together in this way, and not only in this way, but my voice and my singing and my skill can marry to his playing and his music, and I can articulate myself. It was world-changing, right? Because I then realized that I had so many things that I wanted to say, but I'd never given myself the space to, or rather I was expressing them in other ways that weren't in writing, right? At that particular point in juncture, I was interested in kind of visual storytelling, I was interested in fashion, I was interested in film, I was interested in television because it was accessible. Do you know what I mean? Because it's easily understandable. You know how to put together colors, you know how to put together an outfit. But my clothes became my mood board. They became my primary source of expression. But the minute I discovered songwriting, it switched, completely switched, right? I could be more nuanced, I could be more detailed, I could be more, you know? And it changed my world, it changed my life. And to this day, I still can't believe that I can do what I can do. It'll come to me at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'll hear something, I'll hear the squeak of a toilet seat, and something will come. I'll be asleep right before, the few seconds right before I go to bed. Something will come to me. I'll dream about something. It's fantastic how the brain works, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Now that you've said all of that, I really want to understand how and why you ended up here working as a musician, as a performing artist within the music industry.
Yeah.
What led you to this creative talent business? Yeah.
Well, from the point at which I watched Dreamgirls when I was 11, I think that's when I made the decision to be in the music industry. From then on, in my mind, I was already in training. I was in development, right? Self-development nonetheless, but development. I was firmly in the industry, an industry of my own making, of my own imagination. I was living my own fantasy, but that's when I began. But to be a little bit more concise and a little bit more precise about the actual technicalities of being, let's say, in the South African music industry space, it wasn't a quick decision. Because like I said, when I moved from home, when I moved from Egypt to South Africa, I didn't know anybody. In the city, I didn't know anybody in this country. I was also 17. I didn't know nothing about nothing. I was literally coming out of my father's house and experiencing the outside world on my own for the first time. And so it was very important for me to learn and to observe and to understand the environment in which I was functioning, and also how I would function within that environment, right? To learn the tricks of the trade, to learn how it is a musician operates, to learn how it is a singer operates, to learn how all of these different things work. And thankfully, I'm a naturally curious person if I have a vested interest in a thing that I'm curious about. And so I spent, let's say 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17. Those were my learning years. Those were the years that I threw myself through various means. Like I said, Wits Music was a particularly important developmental stage in my career, because being at Wits and being in a society, in a community of other aspiring singers, and like I said, learning from each other and teaching each other, and also then meeting the people that I met there who are still my top collaborators to this day, some of my best friends, right? Some of the people that I'm huge fans of, who I take inspiration from every day. I found them from music. Learning how to put together a show, right? Learning how to stage block and stage manage, and literally from conception to execution, learning how to manage a stage. We were allowed to go to the Wits Theatre, for example, and book that out and have our shows there. And it was our responsibility to figure out lights, to figure out sound, to book lights, to book sound, to stage, set design, AV, stage running, whatever, everything. I was able to learn it from the ground up in a no pressure environment. There was literally no pressure, because win or fail, I was still winning because I was getting to learn. Nobody was going there and expecting an Oscar, Grammy performance ceremony, and it was a fantastic space for us to just experiment and to learn. And I took that and I ran with it. I was fortunate enough, I think in around 2016, to move into a building in Braamfontein when I was still living in Braamfontein. To move into a building, and by pure coincidence, I moved next door to the girlfriend of Sia from The Brother Moves On, the lead singer of The Brother Moves On. Just pure happenstance. I moved next door. We became friends in the duration of us living there. We were neighborly, and I took it upon myself to ask him for help and to understand how it was I could graduate from fine doing shows at Wits and doing shows at the Wits Theatre, but okay, that's a very specific environment. How do I take what I've learned there and apply it in the real world, in the actual music industry? And at that point, I suppose it's the underground music space, right? Because there's a difference, very much a big difference between the Joburg performing arts space and the kind of more mainstream. And he really did take me under his wing in a very non-committal fashion, because he was very busy and all that kind of stuff. But what he could impart, he imparted. He took me with him to his gigs. We put together like an inner city festival, like a three venue inner city festival called Art Party, where we brought all these different bands together, and we went to different venues all around the city, and we performed, and we did, just fantastic. And from them, I understood how the live music scene worked in the city. Right, through The Brother Moves On and through Sia, I met Zuko Collective, I met Leomile, I met the people at Urban Village. The vast majority of the live performing arts scene in Joburg, I met them through my experiences with Sia, and I really owe a large part of my education in that sense to him, and to him opening those doors and exposing me to what that looks like. And just by watching them perform as well, and seeing how they manage that, and how they kind of guerrilla marketing and doing things on the fly and not being dependent on a huge institution, and how to be an independent artist who's in charge of your own destiny, right? But also destination. You know what I mean? You're in charge of everything, and hugely educational experience. And then it was around, he eventually moved out, I think 2 years later after that, and I feel like at that point I was quite ready, right? I was armed enough, I had enough information at the tips of my fingers to begin, and I began very slowly. And I think the first public show that I did outside of Wits, besides that, the Inner City Festival, was at the Orbit. That was my first booking, I think. That was the first time I was ever given a check to sing. And I will never forget that show. I think it was end of 2017 at the Orbit. It was one of the life-changing experiences of my life because it was so affirming, right? Because up until that point, it was conceptual. My idea of being a musician was very conceptual. It's limited to a very small group of people who knew and understood me in that context and were also kind of working within the same vibe and whatever the case might be. But the Orbit was the first time I was out in public and performing to people that had no idea who I was, that had no idea of what I could do, performing my own songs, bear in mind, because at that point I'd built up enough of an archive, or I'd built up enough of a repertoire to be able to perform a full hour and a half set. And the response that I got, I think still the best response that I've gotten ever so far. And that just was the spark that lit the fire that is still burning to this day. It was from then that I decided to make my first EP. It was from there that I was like, okay, let's do this, right? Let me invest money into this. Let me put my head on the block. Let me now firmly become who it is I've always conceptually wanted to be. Let me become the person that I said to my dad when I was 11 I want to be, right? I'm Made to Be Continued, my first EP. And here we are, almost 3 years later.
Do you have any key mentors or people who deeply influence who you are, what you believe in, and what you're committed to in your work and life?
I think on an everyday basis, on living and breathing day to day, Monday to Sunday, I place that responsibility at the feet of my friends. I've been fortunate enough to be able to surround myself with people that inspire me and that teach me and that ground me and that can bring me back to myself every single time. There's not a single friend that I have in my life who is not instrumental to the person that I currently am at this particular point in juncture. They educate me, they stimulate me, they inspire me, right? They're the people that I go and I speak to and I bounce ideas off of. They're the people, they're like the cardboard box to my matches, right? The people that I speak to on the daily and I and from all of that stuff, I'm able to then refine and sieve out the ideas that then become the songs that people know, the songs that people love. Right, and I don't take that lightly. I don't take it lightly at all because it's not a lot of people that can say that. And I'm fortunate that I can say this now because it's taken me a lot of time to then find these people because there have been a lot of starts and stops and errors and wrong people along the way. But I can firmly say that at this particular point in juncture, I place the responsibility of inspiring me to get up and do things and the juice in my body that says, okay, bitch, like let it go. I place that responsibility at the feet of my friends. I also take inspiration from my contemporaries. I take inspiration from the people that have come before me, whether I know them personally or not is besides the point, but there's so much to be learned from observing other people do. And that's how I've learned a lot of what I do now is by watching other people do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, it's like that's wonderful to have a chosen family, right? An external support system.
Yeah.
But I would like also can you please tell me about the family structure, especially like how has your parents' achievement and success shaped your approach to life?
I see. Woo, what a question. Yeah, my father particularly is a huge source of inspiration and has always been kind of this Adonis, not an Adonis, this hero figure.
The beacon.
Yes, a Superman. My father was a liberation hero. He fought the war against the white folk in Zimbabwe, the Chimurenga, the first and the second. And then he was able to, like a phoenix from the ashes, transform himself into this kind of superstar in his own right, Do you know what I mean? A superstar in his own world. A man who, for lack of a better word, just pulled himself by the bootstraps and just went on with it. Highly, highly intelligent, highly analytical, but also inherently human, right? He's never put himself up to be, whatever pedestal he's on is one that I put him on. He's never kind of espoused to be anything other than himself. He's never been, my father's taught me how to be a human being, right? And not how to be a man, no, how to be a human being outside, and how to be responsible in your humanity, right? Be it you're a man, be it you're whatever it is that you are going to be, just be the best that you are at it. Whatever you choose to be, just be the best that you are at it. And that's the lesson that I've taken from him. My mother is the kindest and most nurturing and the funniest of people I've ever met in my whole life. She's hilarious. And that's where I get my gifts from. My mother is wildly talented and in a different world, and had they not grown up in a world of segregation and apartheid and all kinds of nasty, nasty things, my mother would have been a superstar. She's who I get my gifts from, my musical abilities, my ability to sing. And she's who I want to model myself after in the way that I hold myself, in the way that I am with people, in the way that I am, really. She's just a beacon of refinement and grace and also humility as well, right? And that's what I take from my parents. Their successes and their lives and all that, that's well and good. Those are their successes and amazing and wonderful, and they've allowed me to live the life that I have lived and continue to live to this day. But I think the biggest lesson, if God forbid, they were to not be in my life anymore for whatever reason, the biggest lesson that I take from both of them is in how to be a human and how to be a person, actually. I think human is a little too scientific a word. How to be a person, how to be a fully actualized human being, and just to be the best at what you do. Yeah.
When you sit sometimes in your thoughts and your observation and you realize the gift of parenthood and the gift of support system that you've had in comparison to other people who might have not been fortunate enough, what do you think?
Oh my God, it shocks me. I don't take it for granted at all. For me to be able to do the work that I'm doing now is grace. It is luck. It is divine intervention. Because there are people that are much more talented than I am who can sing circles around me. Friends that I know, you know, that don't have the opportunities that I have simply because they didn't have the support structures that I have. They didn't have the privileges that I have. And I always say this, that it really is a game of chance. It is a game of luck. And not for one day do I sit here and kind of be boisterous about it, because I really do understand that it has nothing to do with me. It really has nothing to do with me. I am but 5% of a much larger picture of, like I said, grace and divine intervention. So yeah, I don't take it for granted at all. And I'm still shocked, and I consider myself very lucky that I'm able to sit here and speak to you and speak about music and speak about performing and speak about artistry and and speak about it without having to stress about having a roof over my head or food in my mouth. That's not a privilege that a lot of African artists and a lot of African musicians and singers have. People struggle. They really, really do. And so, in everything that I do, I always remember that, and I'm grateful for it. Because friends of mine, people that I know intimately, that could be doing 1,000 times whatever it is that I'm doing, and are probably even better suited to it than I am, but they can't. Because life just didn't work out in their favor that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have followed you a bit. I have fangirled over your work. I have sat in some of your rehearsals leading towards a show.
Yeah.
And I have seen how incredibly motivated you are and how much of a perfectionist you are, and you have to be,
Yeah.
right? Because you're working towards something. I would like to find out what is the driver of the motivation.
I do not want to be disrespectful to my audience. Somebody listening to you for 3 minutes on their iPod or on their phone, on the radio, that's somebody giving you 3 minutes of their time, 3 minutes of their life. You're asking for somebody to sacrifice something of themselves to listen to you. Worse still, when you add money into the equation, when you ask people to buy your records and they come to your show and you do this and do that, you're taking something from somebody. And how disrespectful would it be for me to ask that of people and then not show up and be my best? And not show up and give them all of me? How completely and utterly disrespectful and pointless. Really, it really is quite pointless. If I'm not going to do my best, if I'm not going to try, at least try, because I'm not so sure that I can reach perfection, but if I can at least try to be perfect and I don't, then what am I doing? I might as well give it up and go do something else. The drive is in my desire to share that aspect of myself with people, to express myself holistically. There's nothing I hate more than not being understood. And I don't want to give people the space to not understand me. I want to be concise. I want to be crystal clear. Right? Let me lay all my cards on the table. And how you take it and how you receive it, that's up to you. But let me have done my job first. And a big part of that job is to make sure that I'm prepared. Is to make sure that I show up and I show out. And that's really it. It's really quite simple. I would like for it to be some kind of self-aggrandizing fantasy of just me being like, oh, I'm that bitch and this, that, and the third. But really it isn't. It's just about respecting the people that have given me the time to listen, and to listen carefully, and to listen with intent. That's a lot. That's a lot. People have problems of their own. They're dealing with death and disease and and then I'm going to say, listen to me, sing in your ear about my problems. And they do that willingly, and then I don't show up. Come on. No, that doesn't work for me. That really doesn't work. And again, going back to the point of, there are so many other people that are doing what I'm doing. There are so many other people that could be doing what I'm doing. But of all of the people, they could be listening to Beyonce or listening to Adele or listening to anybody else, but they're choosing to listen to me. And how dare I not show up and not be my best? Yeah, that's my driving force.
Yeah.
Acknowledging the people that acknowledge me and giving back to them just as much as they give to me. Because it's a gift, it's a blessing for me to be able to say I'm living my dream. What? How many people get to do that? Not a lot. So let me do it to the best of my abilities, whatever that may be.
Having said that, what would you say is the one problem, be it social, political, cultural, or economic, you intend to solve with your work that you can think of right now?
People are lonely. I think I'm growing to realize that people are really, really lonely, and all they want is to be heard and to be listened to. And for somebody to acknowledge them and to acknowledge their existence. And I think music plays a huge role in doing that for people, because music has done that for me. I can't speak about what music will do sociopolitically, historically, whatever, kind of in any kind of larger societal sense. But on a personal level, I want each and every person that hears me, and when I say hear, I literally mean that hears me with intent, to know that I see them, right? In a way that I wish I had been seen by someone else, right? But that's my burden to bear. I am here to provide people with, if not comfort, then at least a sense of peace for the 3 minutes that they put on my music, right? To provide them with somewhere to go, with somewhere to escape to when things just get a little bit too difficult to deal with, or perhaps even a place to confront all these things that they're finding difficult to deal with. That's what I think my responsibility is. Whether I do that or not, I don't know. But I've seen it on an individual level. I've seen it from all the people that send me DMs on Twitter talking about what XYZ song means to them and what it's done for them. Literally just the other day, I got a DM that knocked the air out of my lungs. This kid talking about how he was dealing with COVID and his parents being infected with COVID and how listening to Pray For You allowed him the space to feel and the space to be and the space to be within his feelings. And so that's it. That's my role. That's my responsibility. Whether I do it for one person or I do it for a million or I do it for the entire world, I don't know, but I've seen it. I've seen it happen once, and that's enough for me. And I aim to continue to do it for more people if I can. Yeah.
And like when these moments become transparent to you that what you're doing and the work that you do have healing powers, and I don't think it was on the mood board to be like a healer.
Yeah.
But then it's something that just becomes that, okay, this helps him with this, it's important. When that happens, what do you feel?
Well, I'll say this. I create with intention. I create with intent. I don't make superfluous work, or at least I try not to make superfluous work. Every song that I make, every word that I write, I obsess over semantic detail. Because like I said, I don't want to leave space to be misunderstood. There's a very specific intention in me putting up the music that I do. And I guess consciously or subconsciously, my aim is always to create an impact. Do you know what I mean? But it is always so surprising to know that that impact is healing. Because I guess I'm not narcissistic enough to believe that I can. Do you know what I mean? I want to be, absolutely, but I'm not narcissistic enough to believe that in creating I will be. So when people actually receive healing, it is always shocking. And I now have to learn how to be accepting and acknowledging of what it is that people say to me and how people reflect back my music to me, and not brush it off and not be dismissive of it. Because for the longest time, there was a disconnect in my mind between those two things, right? And like a failure to embrace and accept that responsibility, because it's a grand, big responsibility. But I'm learning slowly but surely, the more that it happens and the more it happens, to be acknowledging, to say, okay, I hear you, and I thank you for listening. Because it's also an indication that the person is listening. If it's made an impact, you were listening, and you weren't listening to Drive Time Radio, you weren't listening to it on the shuffle on the playlist, you were intently listening. And you're allowing me to live my purpose in doing that. Major.
Does the healer heal himself with the work?
Yeah, I try to. I don't think I succeed. Also, I'm growing to understand that part of the growing up process, and this is something that I'm reflecting in my album, and something that I'm learning in the duration of making my album, is that you have to self-parent. There's a point at which you can't put things at the feet of your parents anymore, and you have to take over and grant the self. You know what I mean? And just be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Do you know? But I receive healing through other artists, through other people's work. I receive healing, like I said, from my friends. I receive healing from other people, because at some point it is very easy to get high off your own supply, and I never want to get too high off my own supply, right? So the same way that I've always appreciated the arts and appreciated music and film and art and fashion or whatever the case may be, whatever it is medium of storytelling that exists out there, whatever way that I appreciated it before I became Leon John, quote unquote, is the same way that I still appreciate now that I am this person. I still look to that for healing. I still look to other people. And I see, healing reflected through them and all that good jazz.
Yeah. And what would you say is an underlying message in your work that ties it all together?
You're not alone. You're not alone. You really are not alone. That's something I struggled with. That's one of the biggest things that I struggled with. And I've always been an existential child. I remember being 3 years old and kind of staring into mirrors and staring at myself until I felt like my identity untethered from myself. I don't know if you've ever done that before, but like looking into your own eyes. It's always been very existential. I used to ask myself, oh, is the same sweet that I taste the same sweet that you taste when you eat sugar? Or is the same blue that I see the same blue that you see? When you see blue, do you see red? And when I see blue, do you know what I mean? That kind of existentialism. And part of that comes with them acknowledging, or comes with the knowledge that, or the feeling perhaps, that you are alone, right? That you came here alone, that you die alone. And sometimes we have a tendency to get stuck in those feelings, particularly because we live in a world that is constantly reinforcing the idea that you are alone. And it's getting much worse as time goes on. And so it's easy to give into that feeling, right? That kind of thing of, oh my God, I thought it was just me. And the rude awakening, and the good and the bad, is that you are really not alone. There are other people that are going through the things that you're going through. There are other people that are living in the same world that you do, that are feeling the same things that you're feeling, that are seeing the same things that you're seeing. And it's in being able to understand that and articulate it that, I guess, my work finds potency. And in being able to just put to words what other people can't. That's where perhaps my gift lies, and that's where my responsibility lies. Yeah.
Leon, can you please tell me what comes to you first, a melody or the words?
It really depends. It really, really depends. Sometimes the words come first, sometimes the music comes first, but I guess it's easier when the music comes first, because at least then you have rules and you have confines that you're working within, whereas when it's words, you could literally write pages and pages and pages and pages, and then it's then difficult to refine it to fit a certain musical moment or a certain, like, whatever. But it's happened to me more often than not that words come first, and then when the music comes, it just fits perfectly. Or sometimes, and the easiest way, the music comes first, and then the words just flow. You're drawing from different places, right? When the words come first, it's more of a cerebral process. It's something that you've sat with and you've marinated and you've actively thought about over and over and over again. So much so that the only way that you can make sense of it is to write it down. And then when the music comes first, it is more often than not feeling, pure unadulterated feeling that then just lends itself to that, to words. And it's a game of trying to turn your feelings into words, which is a different process altogether, but both processes produce results. Just really depends. Really, really depends.
And how do the words come to you? Do you dream it?
I dream it sometimes. The moment right before I fall asleep, right? Like right before your brain is about to switch off. It's a beautiful moment for music because your inhibitions are down. There's like a stream of consciousness that comes through with clarity. And sometimes I catch myself right before I fall asleep and I grab my phone and I'm like, I've got so many voice notes on like my note app of me just going da, 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 in the middle of like nearly falling asleep. Sometimes I will dream a full song, as in a full thing. But then more often than not, the minute I wake up, I forget that. I'll go through, if it's a lucid dream, I'll go through a process of just being like, fuck. okay, wake up now before you forget, wake up now before you forget, you're trying to psych yourself up. And then when you eventually do wake up, within 2 seconds it's gone. Or sometimes it's a completely different thing to what it was in your dream. Sometimes it'll be a word. I've been known to write, to be in a room of people. My song One to Shia came up like this, where I was in a room with people and somebody was playing music that was like, okay, this is something, but I don't know what it is. And I said to my friend Boitumelo, who was in the room, give me a word, any word. And then the word that she said was abandonment. And then from there, I was able to just kind of filter out, change abandonment. What does it mean when it's put into vernac? What does it mean when it's put in Xhosa? One to Shia. And there you go. Many ways to skin this cat.
What influences your creativity?
Whew. That's such a broad question. Different things at different times. I can't pinpoint any specific thing, but I guess there's one governing philosophy that governs my creativity, that people will forget what you said, they will forget what you look like, they will forget what you wore, they will forget, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And so I always try and work feeling first and let feeling lead me. And I mean that in quite the literal sense of when I'm creating something, if it doesn't feel right, if I don't believe it, if I don't believe myself, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to do it. I am inspired by passion. I am inspired often by sadness, because sadness is the one feeling that people don't know how to hide. They don't glamorize sadness. Sadness is honest. It is out there. It is the most accessible form of honesty that we have, because people don't hide it. People can glamorize happiness, they'll paint it and put it in Instagram filters and do all that kind of stuff. So it's very difficult sometimes to get true and authentic happiness. But sadness inspires me because it's real. I like reality. I'm inspired by reality. I'm inspired by real events and real people, and speaking about things and doing things that come from a real place, things that have function and use, and that are not superfluous, and that are not just pie in the sky. Maybe other people are meant to do that, and I really truly believe that there's some people that are musicians and who do music work and who do artwork that are meant to titivate in a kind of fun, bubblegum way. That's their role, that's their job. There's a space and there's a time for that, but I really don't believe that that's my responsibility, and that's not what I pull from. I'm not frivolous. I try not to be frivolous. I'm very serious, because I talk about serious things, because I think those are the only things that are worth talking about, or rather those are the things that people choose not to talk about. Right? People talk about not serious things all the time. It's easier to talk about things like that. I don't want easy. I want real. I want the grit, the texture. Give me that. So that's where I really take inspiration from, in a very kind of broad sense. I think that's the best way to describe it, really, because that applies to everything. That applies to music, that applies to film, applies to anything. My human interactions. I have friends and friendships with people that I can feel a reality from, that I can feel honesty from. And I don't mean honesty in the colloquial sense. I mean honesty in an authentic sense, somebody that is holistically and completely themselves. And that really inspires me, and I want to surround myself with people like that, because there's always so much to draw from that. There's nothing more fascinating than real life. There's nothing in fantasy or an illusion that beats real life. Yeah, that's what I take inspiration from.
Somebody.
Yeah.
The song.
Yeah.
Take me through it.
Well, it was one of the first songs that I wrote from nose to tail. And it was a song that worked. The music came first and then the words came after. And it was a literal stream of consciousness. I remember, I even have the recording. We hadn't rehearsed it. He was just playing these chords. I had these words on my phone. I started to play, I started to sing, and it worked, it flowed easily. That there was some kind of divine intervention in that. And I know I say divine intervention a lot, but I really truly believe that like Jesus walks, Spirit does walk. And I didn't realize it at the time, and sometimes that happens to me where I'll be so caught up in the moment of making a song that I don't realize what it's about until way after. Or sometimes it becomes prophetic. I have songs that become prophetic. They become true later on. But Somebody was a song that I, in hindsight, only after I was able to get the thoughts and the words out of my body, that I realized was a process of me coming to terms with and articulating whatever emotions and feelings I felt about my brother's death, my elder brother's death. He died in 2010 of suicide. He killed himself in a foreign country. He was in Malaysia, and he never left a note. He didn't leave a note. And so for the longest time, my parents have always kind of questioned why, and they've always wondered because they never got any closure in that sense. And so I really did write Somebody for me, but also for my mother, right? It was my way of imagining what he must have felt when he was in those final moments before he took his life. What he must have felt in the days leading up to it, in the months leading up to it. That, I will mention that people are alone and they feel alone. And Somebody really was a reflection of that loneliness, written specifically from my perspective because I understood what that loneliness was like. I understood suicidal ideation. I understood the action of taking one's life because I'd been through that before. Even before my brother's suicide attempt, I had my own. And so it was my way of imagining that and putting it to words and kind of giving him a final voice, giving him final thoughts, and relieving myself, and relieving my parents, and relieving my mother, perhaps, I'd like to think. And if not giving them closure, at least giving them a sense of comfort. Yeah, I think that's the best way that I can possibly phrase it, giving them a sense of comfort. Whether or not I achieved that, I don't know. I've never had a conversation with my parents about it, but I hope so. I at least hope that's what it did for them.
And having experienced something like suicide without a reason, like without a note, does it almost feel like death without the body? Ever finding the body?
Well, no, because we saw the body, right? The net result of his actions was visible, like it was there. I guess death without a body, I suppose, not that I've never experienced it before, but I assume the leading feeling would be not believing because you don't have a physical representation of this action. But we had a physical representation of this action. What we didn't have was a reason why. What were the events leading up to? That was what the gray area was. So it was less about accepting, and it was less about kind of being able to accept the death, and more about wanting to understand how and why, and being curious as to, because it could be anything, right? In an instance like that, it literally could be anything, as big as you can imagine, or as small as you can imagine. And that's what's so unfortunate about it, is that it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. Yeah.
Do your parents know that what Somebody was about?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
They do. Yeah, I had to have a conversation with them about it before I started speaking about it publicly, just to get their consent, because I didn't want to violate them in that way and be talking about things that are so private and so personal, particularly as it pertains to their experience and what it is that they're experiencing. So I was very cognizant of that. It's one thing to write about it in song, it's another to speak about it in an interview. And so I was very careful to be like, yo, this is what's going to go on, I'm going to do this. And they were like, okay, it's part of your story too, so you have just as much right to talk about it as anybody else does. So yeah, we had to have a conversation because I didn't want it to be like a surprise. Just now they're seeing me yapping off and popping off on the internet about things that they don't want to be discussed. But yeah, they're aware, you know.
I mean, that song hits. It really transcends. And do you think when people, when the audience enjoyed it and consumed it, did they know what it was about?
I don't think so, but at the same time, I don't think it matters, right? Because at some point, at the point at which I put the song out for I always say this, and I was saying this recently to somebody, the point at which I receive the final master or the final mix of whatever song I'm about to put out, it ceases being my story, it becomes other people's story. What other people make of the song, what other people make of their story, is up to them. And people need to be given the license and the freedom to do that. But I guess from hearing other people tell me that it adds a different dimension of understanding when they now know the story behind it. Do you know what I mean? They listen to it from a different perspective. And that's all well and good, but at the same time, it's also my responsibility to leave space for them. That's where the relating comes from, right? That's where the two parties come together, the musician and the listener. That's where they come together by the mutual sharing of experiences. If they're exact, fine. If they're not exact, then that's also good as well. But yeah.
And there was the intensity of Poison.
Yeah.
How much of that was biographical?
Oh, very biographical. Intensely biographical. And Poison was one of the songs that became prophetic, where I wrote about the experience before it actually happened. Or rather, it hadn't clarified up until that point. I hadn't been able to articulate it up until that point. And I guess once the song was written, and I was able to see it, and I was able to hear it, it was a lot harder for me to ignore what was happening. And people always think that my songs are about lovers and relationships and all that, and really, to be quite honest, I don't know anything about that. No. Most of them are about friends, right? And I like to give the same weight to my romantic relationships that I give to my platonic relationships, because these are the people that I spend my life with, romantic or otherwise. These are the people that I give my time. And sometimes it's even more heartbreaking to break up with a friend than just to break up with a lover, because at least there's a protocol on how to do that. You know what I mean? Lovers come and go. That's how it's supposed to go, right? They come and they go. But friends are supposed to be forever. And when you get into friendships, you proceed as though that's forever. And when something that heartbreaking happens, when you realize that the friendship that you have with a person is not good for you, that it's poisonous for you, and yet you still stay and you still accept the friendship in the way that it's being given because they make you laugh or this or whatever reason it is that you're staying, that's a really tragic admission. That is a really, really tragic admission. And it needed me writing that song to be able to look back at myself and be like, wow, is this really the person that you are? And sure, the dissolution of the friendship happened years after that, maybe 2 or 3 years after that. But at that particular point in time, it was a reality that I was dealing with. I think like, wait, hold on a minute. Your poison really does taste like sugar. And that's, an awful business.
And you gave us a body of work titled To Be Continued. Can you please, what was in the name?
I felt at the time that because it was the start, it was the beginning of everything, or at least it was the beginning of me putting out work, permanent work that would stay within the public archive for the foreseeable future, I felt that it was important for me to say to people, this is what I can do right now, this is what I'm capable of doing right now, but this isn't it. I am still growing, I am still learning, I am still developing. These stories that I've touched upon are but bits and pieces of a much, 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 much larger book that I haven't even begun to crack on. And I need you to understand that in you listening to them, this is a work in progress, and it will be continued. That this isn't it. It is but the beginning. It is but the beginning. And that's what's happening now. The truth of what I promised is being realized. The story is continuing. It's been 3 years since I put out that first EP project. And in that space, in that time, I've grown, I've developed, I've changed. I'm older, my voice sounds different. So many things have happened. I've quit smoking, which makes my voice, I've gained back octaves that I've lost in years before. I've become a better writer, I'd like to believe. I've become more knowledgeable about the industry that I'm working in, about the constraints and the confines of being an independent artist. With the benefit of experience and the benefit of hindsight, I know how to maneuver myself. I've become a better producer. I've had a more refined ear, right? The gap between potential and actualization is growing smaller and smaller. And the net result of that is better work, better music. It's more refined. I've developed more intricate tastes. I've listened to more artists. I've developed more varied interests. I've experienced more things. I am growing, right? And in that is the continuation. That's the continuation. And I think now is the time for me to exhibit what that continuation has been and deliver on my promise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get to the continuation, I would like for us to speak about Black Sunrise.
Yeah.
Because oh my, that's something else.
Right.
That's a real tearjerker, you know.
Yeah. Well, Black Sunrise is part of the continuation actually, because it's not actually out. I've only ever done it as a performance, as a public performance, as a little piece like on YouTube and whatever the case may be, and that's the only version of it that exists at this current moment in time. And because it's such a personal song and it's so very specific, I didn't want to just throw it around and bandy it about. I needed to be in the right space. I needed to have the right skills and the right knowledge and the right resources to really be able to extract everything that I could from that moment and turn it and make it into the moment that it could be. Do you know what I mean? And I think, yeah, that's one of the songs in the upcoming project, in the upcoming album.
Literally, Black Sunrise, it's a textured moment in time. I can feel it.
You can see it.
I can see it.
Right.
In the absence of light, I can
Right.
see the Black Sunrise.
And I guess that's part of the experience of the song, right? Particularly in the pre-chorus, where I'm literally detailing a physical reaction to an emotional experience. You know, my lungs contract and I wake. You know, still don't know how I was able to write that song. Still don't know how it came to me, but I'm grateful nonetheless that I was the vessel that was chosen to deliver that message, because again, it comes from experience. It comes from knowing what that is like, and every word, every syllable, every note that I sing in that song is coming from a place of knowledge. There's nothing about it that's me kind of picking it up out of thin air or just like use. Every word is true to word in its particular, which is why you can feel it, because that's how it's meant to be experienced, because that's how I experience it. And I guess it's part of that whole existential conversation that I was having of just being like, okay, part of my responsibility is to show people that you're not alone, right? That the red that you're seeing is the same red that I'm seeing. The same black sunrise that you're seeing is the same black sunrise that I'm seeing. And when your lungs contract, my lung contracts too. And so that song.
What does it mean to you?
Everything. It's the most personal of all of the songs that I've ever written, in the instance that it is completely and holistically about me. It's not a reaction to other people. It's not about other people's actions. It's not about this, not about that. It's about me. How I am feeling, which is something that I don't often indulge myself in, because I sometimes feel like as though being overly self-invested is self-indulgent, and it bores people, and there's no point. But Black Sunrise is the one moment where it's just me. It's just me. It's not about my world, it's not about my environment, it's not about other people. It's just me. And that's the freedom in that. The self-analysis, it relieves me. It really does relieve me, because it makes me feel as though I'm not crazy. Because I listen back to it, I'm like, okay, I've been able to articulate it and put my feelings into words, then it must be real. It's tangible, right? Like I can touch the paper that it's written on. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. So it's relieving.
And just the use of words and language, Black Sunrise.
Yeah.
Is it something that signifies something, symbolizes, or metaphorical, or it's literal, or it's something that you would like to leave to the listener to interpret for themselves?
Well, it's all of those things actually. It's actually quite literal because when I wrote the song, I was asleep and in my old apartment, and it just so happened that my bed was kind of against a wall that had a window right above it, and the window there was a view of Nelson Mandela Bridge, and you know those like how the lights of the Nelson Mandela Bridge turn a very specific color and that they can change them and switch them, and also the street lights right outside. I could also see the street lights, and those street lights are a very specific color of amber. And I was asleep. I'd taken a nap, I think, and then I woke up at around 10 o'clock, I think. And it was one of those sleeps where I was very dazed, and I thought it was morning. I really legitimately thought it was morning because I'd been asleep for so long, and the sleep was so deep that I then looked outside to confirm that it was morning. Then all I could see, because I was looking kind of from above into the window, all I could see was this amber lighting, like this like orange light, but in pitch black darkness. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, it's like a black sunrise. And I was like, whoa, what does that mean? And then from there, it switched from just being a mere observation into being a metaphorical representation of a feeling, right? Like being so lost and being so dazed and being so depressed that you are able to recognize what is happening. Is it dark? Is it light? Is it light in the dark? Is it dark? You have no idea what's happening. It's a representation of an emotional state of being, the dichotomy of a black sunrise. That even when it's the brightest point of the day, when the sun is rising, right? When the sun is up in the sky, yet you still feel that darkness. In the brightest of skies, you still feel darkness. So it's metaphorical, it's literal, it's philosophical, it's any goal that you can think about that you can put to it, really. It depends on how you want to interpret it. It really does depend on how you interpret it, and in all the different ways, it means the same thing. It really does mean the same thing. Yeah.
And the dawn of a new era.
Oof, yeah. It is the dawn of a new era. We're making new music. We're the continuation of the promise that was made in the EP is happening. It's currently happening. I'm quite afraid actually that people are going to think that the project is called The Dawn of a New Era. It's not called The Dawn of a New Era. I was merely mentioning that it's the Dawn of a New Era. I should probably change that. But during the lockdown, at some point, I'd had this collection of songs from all the years that I've been writing and making music, since I discovered that I could make music, that I could write. I had all of these songs, and at a point, they always felt disembodied and dismembered, like they were random moments in time. And I didn't know what connected them. And in the years previous, there'd always been thoughts of, oh, make an album. But I was like, I don't know what I would be talking about, because the music that I have at the moment, disparate. And then it was at some point during the lockdown when I was sitting just looking around, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, damn, this is the third global pandemic that I've lived through. And that was it. That changed something in me. Then I began to think of my life holistically and in context. And in context of the music that I had, Black Sunrise, Poison, all of this music that I had, both the released stuff and the unreleased. And I then realized that the environment that allowed for these feelings and for this music to take place is not a kind environment. Which then took me down a path of looking at our world holistically and realizing that at 25, I'm 25 years of age this year, 2020, this COVID is the third global pandemic that I've lived through. I've lived through the Arab Spring, I've lived through Fees Must Fall, lived through gender-based violence, lived through Black Lives Matter, lived through Me Too, lived through just the Iraq War, all the wars, all the genocide, the Rwandan genocide, all of these things have happened close to or within my lifetime. How did that happen? In a world where we were promised Disney fantasies, where we were fed this very specific idea, be it by our parents or by the environment in which we live in, the world that we live in, we were fed this very specific idea of not a utopia, but of a world that is much better than the world that we're currently living in now. And it's not living up to its promises. It really is not living up to all of its promises. That's then where the thread of all this music that I had began to make sense. In all of these realizations, I also realized that as a black man, and it's not a qualification that I use very often, but it's particularly important in this instance, that as a black man, we haven't been given the space to express these feelings, to address them, to be angry about them, to be upset about them, to question, to feel, to think. Everything is just expected to wash over us, right? And I'm sure black women as well have the same expectation, but I'm talking about that specific space of feeling, of being allowed to express yourself and express the frustrations that you feel about the environment and the world that you're living in. Is it any surprise that the highest cause of death amongst men over the age of 20 is suicide? Is it any surprising that we're dying and we're depressed and we're suicidal and we're anxious when nobody has acknowledged the fact that we are inheriting a shit show? And I don't mean this just as a black man, I mean this as a human being. As a human being of the 21st century, coming to the realization that the likelihood of you living to the age of 80 or whatever is gradually getting lower and lower because the planet is dying, right? As black people in this country, in South Africa, and black people the world over, our life expectancy is shortening and shortening because we don't have opportunity. We are poor, we are struggling. We are struggling against corruption, we are struggling against poverty, we are struggling against institutional racism, we are struggling against global pandemics, we are struggling against oppressions of a multitude of kinds. There is no space to breathe, and nobody has apologized. What I thought that I would be doing for my first album is nothing to the realizations that I'm having now, where I was thinking back to the fact that you grow up and you're told, and your parents tell you must go to school and go to university and be good and be kind and do all of these things. There's a prescription, a manual of a life that you're supposed to have, right? Go and be an accountant and study accounting, or be a doctor or be a lawyer, and everything will be okay. And you'll be fine, and you can live happily ever after. But the very same people that went to school, that went to university, that did all of these things that we were told to do, we ticked every box along the way. We are still standing at the roads, standing at the robots, begging for jobs. It's the same. We're still begging nonetheless. Nobody has acknowledged this. Nobody has given us the space to feel, to get through it, to process, to analyze, to go through, to consider. And that's what's becoming more and more transparent as I make this album. And that's my goal, really, to give not only me, but everybody else that listens the license to feel. To be as petulant, to be as angry, to be as irritated, to point fingers, to be anything you want to be. That's the kind of environment and space that I'm creating in this album. So that we can go through the motions and go through the emotions and go through them and feel them all. And really be in the hurt and be in the pain. And then we can speak about solutions afterwards. Right? And also, how unfair is it that we're the ones that are expected to come up with solutions to problems that we didn't create? It's completely nonsensical. It's completely nonsensical. And these are the realizations, and these are the kind of... and I'm working through myself. I'm working on myself and through myself through this music. Yes, it's about the environment of the world at large, but also about my distinct failures and my distinct idiosyncrasies as a result of that, right? How it's affected my ability to be in relationships with people, how it's affected my relationship, my interpersonal relationships, romantic, platonic, whatever. How it's affected my career, how it's affected my mental health, how it's affected the very air that I breathe, right? That's what I'm working through. And I'm trying to understand that. And I like to think of it as a coming of age, a rude awakening. Both things happening at the same time. That you're coming of age, but that coming of age is a rude awakening, and realizing that all is not as it should be. All is not as they said it would be. All is not as was promised. And how unfair. Really, honestly, how unfair. And that's part of the self-parenting that I was speaking about earlier that comes into question, and it comes into play where now, after this, or at least after you create a space where you can go through it, after that then the responsibility is on us to make it work and make it happen. But we can't get there before we go through this. And I think that's what's becoming more transparent to me as I'm making this album. And it's heartbreaking. It's really, really quite heartbreaking. I thought I was going to be talking about, oh my God, you broke my heart, and fuck you, and this, that, and the thing. No. Instead, I'm talking about begging for jobs with the robots. What can you do?
In your singing, in your sharing your message, when you do perform, do you sometimes feel like you are ministering?
You know, you're the second person to say that to me in the last 2 weeks. And I would have to say perhaps, right? Because if my responsibility is to narrate, if my responsibility is to educate, if my responsibility is to caution and to activate, that forms part of my ministry, right? That is a form of ministry. It's not religious, and I have to shy away from kind of being overly religious, because I suppose the way that I dress and my imagery is a bit religious in nature. It's only because I really enjoy kind of that kind of imagery. But I guess so. In the way that every artist and every musician is a minister of some kind. If you have a message, then you're ministering. It's just unfortunate that ministering is always often painted under the same umbrella as kind of evangelicism and all that kind of stuff, and charismatic evangelicism. But if we're taking the meaning of the word and stripping it to its purest of essences, then I suppose so. I am ministering to people. I'm ministering about my life, about certain things, about my observations. So yes, I think I would agree, as long as we're taking it out of a religious context, because I don't want to blaspheme and I don't want to insult anyone really, because that's not my intention. But in the purest meaning of the word, I can accept that title. I can accept that responsibility.
In terms of reach, how important is reach for you when you're working on a body of work?
It's not. I can't think about that. I have to think about the work on its own merits. Whether it's heard by one person or it's heard by a million, it is of no significance to me. As long as it's my responsibility is to create it, is to make it. Then people have to meet me halfway. Do you know what I mean? people really have to meet me halfway. If you want to listen to it, listen to it. If it speaks to you, it speaks to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I can't waste valuable time thinking about wanting to appeal to everybody and wanting to reach out to everybody. That's not that really isn't my work. That's not what I'm about. That's not what I'm for. And it really just it becomes a distraction, because you end up getting caught in the trap of cultivating reach and not doing the work. And I'm more interested in doing the work regardless of the reach. If I make this album and it sits in a closet somewhere for millennia and nobody gets to hear it, that is fine. But I know that I made it. I know that I'm not crazy, that there's tangible proof of the fact that I did my job, that I lived my purpose. I met my destiny at the door. Whether it is other people open, that really is up to them. Really is up to them. But that is not to say that I'm not grateful for each and every person that does listen. That's not to say that I don't want people to listen to it. I really do. I wouldn't be making it if I didn't want people to listen to it. I would just keep it to myself and sing in my own shower, because it's basically the same thing, you know what I mean? I just minister to myself. But I do want people to listen to it. I'm making it for other people. This is my way of being of service to my community, to my society, to my humanity. And part of that involves other people and giving it to other people and hoping that the work is of service and does something. Again, I go back to the fact that I don't want to create superfluous work. It has to have meaning. It has to have substance. It has to have function. And so I really do hope that people listen to it and they give it the time and they listen. And when I say listen, I mean really, really listen. Because it's made with intention, and I hope it's received with intention. But I can't, whether it does or not, I don't know, but it's what I hope.
Releasing an EP, now it's your debut album. What are you hoping for?
I don't know if I'm hoping for anything in particular. Like I said, I'm just hoping that people give it the time and people listen. And they listen with intent. Above and beyond that, I really can't say that I'm hoping for anything else. It's not up to me. Everything else, once I've made the work, is out of my hands. It belongs to other people. Again, like I said, people have to meet me halfway. They really have to meet me halfway. The choice is up to them. So, in terms of what I hope it does, I couldn't say, but yeah, it's people. I want people to listen, and I hope it speaks to them, but it makes their lives a little easier. They feel seen, they feel acknowledged, and they feel like they're not alone. Yeah, that's it really. But that's not my preoccupation. It's just simply one of the footnotes of my experience.
Cultural radar. What is moving the needle and hitting the cultural nerve right now?
I just discovered this black French artist called Giselle. I love everything that she stands for. I love what she's about. She's a stunning singer. And you never think of the Francophone world as needing representation. We never think of anything outside of the English world as needing representation. We're always speaking about representation in the context of English films and English things and whatever. But she's giving black representation within the Francophone world. And she's doing it in France. And she's succeeding. And she's beautiful. And she's just, I love her politics. I love everything that she stands for. I love her music. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. There's this new show called P-Valley by this amazing writer called Kitori Hall. That's one of my highlight moments of the year in terms of television and script craft. It's a show made by black women and queer people for black women and queer people, and speaks about the stripping culture, but in a way that we haven't seen it being represented before, whereas we always see stripping in a very negative light, within a very specific kind of lens, a very male-centric lens. And this takes that and flips on its head and portrays stripping as athleticism, right? As a feat of physical strength, as a talent, as a skill, as an art. And I think that's so beautiful because these women are empowered and they are earning money doing something that they're skilled and talented at, and they're not shamed for it. Kitori Rhodes does not shame the people in the show. The way that she represents queer love is without shame. It is with the same brushstroke as she represents heterosexual love, and I think that is so important. It's so vital to see black women as multifaceted, multidimensional characters, not caricatures, but fully realized human beings that make mistakes, that fall in love, fall out of love, make bad choices, make good choices. I can't speak about this show enough. It is a show that is intentional in its politics, that is intentional in its storytelling, and I really, really do wish that every person could tune in and watch it because it's such a needed change in narrative, and it's exactly where I think we need to be headed in terms of kind of representation in film and television that is not constantly portrayed under the guise of trauma or exploitation. And just empowering characters and empowering people to make decisions and make choices, right? That's what's so amazing to see. Characters and people that make informed and empowered decisions that are not founded in trauma. So yes, P-Valley. Yeah, I think those are the cultural moments that stand out to me this year. If I think of anything else, I'll be sure to let you know. Urban Village is releasing a new album, which I love. Zoe Tika's album was incredible. Just this masterpiece of she's such a stunning singer, such a stunning performer, and such a stunning writer as well. And conceptually, I love a good concept. And her album was so conceptually strong, not just in the imagery of it, but in the way that she wrote it. It is identifiable, it is of service, it's intentional in who it is speaking to and what it is speaking about. And the way that she takes concepts and she takes realities that we thought we knew, but she flips them over and uses them in order to be able to portray and convey her story. She uses Bible references in order to convey an authentically African story without leaning too heavily on the Christianity aspect of it. And I think that's so powerful. And she does this throughout her album. And I thought that was just such a stroke of brilliance, particularly because she's doing it in isiZulu. Monet was a stunning friend of mine, so talented, who's also another person that is so needed and so necessary within the South African music scene because he is intentional about being Venda and representing Venda music and writing in Venda and speaking about Venda experiences in a musical landscape that is dominated by Nguni language, music, songs, and experiences. And he is just so important, and he's so brilliant, and he's so talented. And I can't speak enough about his work. His most recent single, Burudu, was amazing, and I can't wait for people to hear more of the stuff that he's making. Just an incredible, incredible body of work. And I think next year is going to be such an interesting year because we're going to be fed. We're going to be really fed musically. And by all of these people that are doing such great work, and I'm so happy and so glad to be in an environment and a community of independent artists that are making art that people love and are doing things without the limitations of the mainstream world and not doing things without the limitations of, and we're living in a time where the independent artists rule, and I'm happy for that. And I love seeing it flourishing within my own community, within my own culture, within my own country. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about the collaborators that I'm working with. I'm excited about Jeff Tatenda Chitima, who's this incredible producer who's doing a lot of production work on my album. In fact, the bulk of the production work on my album. And I can't wait for people to hear the work that he's doing and just his talent and his skills. I can't wait for people to hear, Kekelingo also is releasing an album and he's doing such incredible and amazing work, and I can't wait for people to hear that and whatever collaborations conversations come up between all of us. And I don't know, man, it's just an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be a musician, and especially to be a musician that is intentional about what we want to do and who we're talking about and who we want to represent and what we want to be of service to.
By what standards do you judge yourself?
By the most impossible standards, by unattainable standards that I don't even think I'm fully able to comprehend.
I am most happy when
I am asleep.
I believe in
honesty, passion, in feeling.
What is your personal mission statement?
To narrate, to advise, to activate, and to caution.
What is your daily prayer?
Mthetho bomnyama kuvele kukhanya makwande kunweno lendawo zonke.
What do you wish for yourself?
I wish peace and freedom. Yeah, that's it. Peace and freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from hate, freedom from doubt, and peace over my life. Yeah. For me, to do the job that I was brought here to do, fulfill my destiny, to fulfill my purpose